When you hear Book of Revelation, what comes to mind? Probably epic battles, right? The end of the world, prophecies about some far-off future. But what if? What if that's all a misunderstanding? What if the entire way we've been reading it is just wrong? That's what we're going to dive into today.
Yeah, I mean, what if the apocalypse isn't a roadmap to the future at all? What if it's a super complex, coded story about something that already happened? Something, absolutely central to the Christian faith. It's a pretty radical idea, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack. So there's this scholar, Noel Robertson Platt, who puts forward this really wild thesis. He basically argues that we've been looking at Revelation through the wrong lens for, get this, 2,000 years. He's saying it's not a prophecy. Nope. It's an allegory, a big symbolic story written to describe a very real, very past event, the Easter story.
Okay, so let's get into it. You might be asking, where does the classic end of the world interpretation even start to fall apart? Well, it starts right in the very first verse, with what some people call the 2,000-year problem. Check this out. The book opens by saying it's showing what must soon take place. Soon. But here we are, more than 2,000 years later, and, well, we're still waiting, right? That's a pretty big contradiction. I mean, how do you square soon with 2 millennia of nothing happening yet? Well, this new theory has an answer for that. It asks, what if soon really did mean soon? What if the fulfillment of that prophecy isn't in our future, but way back in our past? Think about it. Right before the first Easter, around 30 AD, Jesus literally told his disciples what was about to happen to him. The whole shebang, the betrayal, the suffering, the crucifixion, and then the resurrection. Could that be the revelation of what must soon take place? Okay, but that brings up a huge question, right? If the author, who we think is the Apostle John, was just retelling the Easter story, why on earth would he write it as this bizarre, complicated, coded apocalypse? Why not just tell the story? Well, the answer, it turns out, might have everything to do with the historical context. He was in the middle of a fight against a really dangerous heresy. And that heresy was called Docetism. Now, the Docetics believed that Jesus was pure spirit. They claimed he wasn't really a flesh and blood human being. So his body, his pain on the cross, his death, they said it was all just an illusion, like a hologram. And for the early church, this wasn't some minor theological debate. No way. This was a direct attack on the very core of their faith. So here's the genius of it, according to this theory. The allegory, the whole crazy vision of Revelation, wasn't meant to hide the truth. It was meant to highlight it. It's like this brilliant reversal. The Docetines are saying, hey, Jesus' physical life was an illusion. So what does John do? He creates this massive visionary illusion of his own, but he uses it to point back to the raw, physical, bloody reality of the crucifixion and say, this is the real truth. He's literally fighting an illusion with an illusion. Pretty clever, right? And that brings us to what you might call the smoking gun of this whole thesis. We're moving past just general themes now. The argument gets super specific. It claims that the actual structure of Revelation maps directly, almost like a blueprint, onto the timeline of the Easter story. Just look at this. The theory lays it out plain and simple. Key chapters in Revelation follow the exact sequence of Passion Week. So Revelation 16, that's the Passion, Christ's sufferings. Then Revelation 17, that's his death, the crucifixion. Chapter 18 is the burial. And it all culminates in Revelation 20, which lines up with the resurrection. I mean, once you see that pattern laid out, it's kind of hard to unsee it. All right, so that's the big picture claim. But does it really hold up when you look at the details? Let's do a little case study. We're going to zoom right in on one of the most famous parts of Revelation, the fall of Babylon in chapter 18, and see how this theory unpacks the code. Now, most people read this chapter and see the future destruction of some evil global empire. That's the traditional view. But according to this interpretation, that whole dramatic scene of a city falling and people mourning, it's not about a city at all. It's a coded, symbolic description of a funeral. And not just any funeral, the burial of Jesus Christ. And this is where the details get, well, incredibly specific. So Revelation 18 talks about kings and rich merchants who are crying over Babylon's fall. Now stop and think, who actually buried Jesus? The Gospels tell us, right? It was Nicodemus, who was a ruler, and Joseph of Arimathea, who the text specifically calls a rich man. A rich man and a ruler. Rich merchants and kings. The character descriptions,
They're a perfect match. Let's lay this out side by side. On one hand, you have the fall of Babylon, which was basically shorthand for the capital city of sin. This theory says that's an allegory for the death of Christ, who, in Christian theology, took on all the world's sin. The mourning rich guys and rulers, that's Joseph and Nicodemus. But the most mind-blowing parallel, the one that really makes you stop and think, has to do with a stone. So in the vision in Revelation, a mighty angel picks up this huge stone, a great millstone, and hurls it into the sea to show that Babylon is gone for good. Just lock that image in your head, a mighty angel and a great stone. Okay, now let's flip over to the gospel story of the burial. What does Joseph of Arimathea do? He rolls a large stone in front of the tomb. So if you're following the logic of this allegory, the mighty angel is Joseph, and the great millstone, that's the tombstone. It's a direct one-to-one physical parallel between the wild vision and the actual historical event. So, if this whole theory holds water, it's a really big deal. It doesn't just change how we read one book of the Bible. It could actually change how we think about the very purpose of prophecy itself.
And you know what's wild? The book of Revelation itself might actually give us the key to unlock this. There's a line in chapter 19 that says, "The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy." Think about that. Maybe the whole point of prophecy isn't about predicting the future, but about bearing witness, about giving testimony to the story of Jesus.
At the end of the day, what we're looking at is a massive shift in perspective. If this theory is right, the apocalypse isn't some scary blueprint for the future anymore. Instead, it becomes this incredibly creative, powerful testimony to the past. It becomes a profound witness to the physical, real, flesh and blood truth of the gospel. So that leaves us with a pretty provocative question to chew on, doesn't it? Have we really spent 2,000 years trying to decode a map of the future, when all along we should have been reading a powerful testament to the past? It's a question that really challenges us to look at the Bible's most mysterious book with a whole new set of eyes. Thanks for digging into this with me.